So we're talking natural birth traps all this month. And this is something that I have noticed in the 10 years that I've been in the birth community. And it happens over and over again, where you're planning a natural birth. You think you have the right map when it comes to planning a natural birth, but you're making some crucial mistakes when it comes to planning a natural birth. And I call these the natural birth traps. I talk about this inside my book, Your Empowered Birth. Our mainstream maternity care system and the way that our birth culture is, often these things seem pretty normal. They seem like just things that you're always supposed to do that you don't even think about, but they do derail natural births because a true physiological birth cannot have these things for it to work and unfold the way it needs to. So the last few weeks, I've been talking about the natural birth traps, and you can go back and watch those videos, or you can even go to www.empoweringmomsbirth.com/store, and you will be able to find a natural birth guide that tells you about the 20 traps that you want to avoid. It's free. You can just download it. It will go and be sent right to your email, and then you can read the entire list as a frame of reference. But I'm doing a deep dive on these natural birth traps. The natural birth trap number 11 on this list is this: doctors and midwives who don't know how to sit on their hands. This is a huge natural birth trap because the truth is that with physiological birth, you don't actually need anybody to do things to you. In fact, your body is designed to birth. The more likely your doctor or midwife is to be sitting on their hands, the better off you're going to be physiologically. In fact, Dr. Michel Audin actually says, do not disturb the birthing woman. He says that the best kind of midwife is the one that's sitting in the corner knitting. Why knitting? Not because of any patriarchal thing, but because of the fact that if she's knitting, she's obviously not going to be using her hands to get in and interfere with your birth, right? This is also especially true with breech birth. A lot of times what I see inside of the mom communities is moms are like, well, what happens if my baby is breech? Well, if your baby is breech, what you need is a provider who knows how to sit on their hands, because you do not actually want to touch the breech baby. You want to be on your hands and knees, following your instincts, and your baby will naturally come out. Every once in a while, maybe your doctor might need to do something, but this is very rare. And Dr. Stu also talks about this with the Birthing Instincts podcast about very rarely does he actually touch the breech baby because it's not needed. Well, this is the same for a baby that's born head first. You don't actually need to have anything done. You don't need anybody to pull you. You don't need anybody to touch your perineum. You don't need anybody to guide the head out. You know how to do all that. In fact, if somebody is messing with your perineum while your baby is coming out, they can actually cause tearing. Or if they're trying to pull the baby out, they can cause more damage than if you just let the physiological birth process happen. So I myself, when I was birthing my daughter and I experienced the fetal ejection reflex, my midwife didn't touch me. She knew not to touch me. She just placed her hand under where the baby's head was coming out in the water, but she did not touch me and she did not touch my baby. It was more like, I'm going to be here just so that she doesn't torpedo her head just to the bottom of the pool. And then once she was out, she pulled the baby up out of the water and put the baby on my chest. But no touching was necessary. In contrast to what I see in the hospitals a lot of the times, where you get the head out and then suddenly, before the shoulders can rotate, someone is actually pulling the baby and rotating the shoulders. And it can be incredibly traumatic, especially because it hurts. Okay, I had that happen to me. I know that it hurt. So natural birth trap number 11 is that you don't want anybody to be touching you. You want a midwife or a doctor who is going to be hands off. This is why I train a lot of my clients with unassisted childbirth, because even if they have a doctor in the room, that doctor is hanging back, waiting to be called in if they're needed. But if they're not needed, you could actually birth your baby without any interventions. And this also allows you, when you're planning a hands-off birth, to call the shots. So you can be like, you can't touch me until I give you permission. It stops them from their whole controlling maternity care where they might do things to you without permission and control your birth and cause trauma. They can't do that if you are saying, I want a hands-off birth. So that's natural birth trap number 11. Natural birth trap number 12, unsupportive family. I've talked about this with the right support. When you have unsupportive family members, their own little fears get lodged into your brain. They will continue to say things that can undermine your confidence, especially if they've never seen a physiological birth, never had a physiological birth, don't understand anything about physiological birth. Like just the other day when I was hanging out with my stepbrother, he was saying how he would feel better if his wife was in the hospital to have their baby. And I said, oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can be in the hospital if you want. But if you're going to do that, just recognize that physiological birth doesn't really happen very often in the hospital unless you have the training and the experience to know how to hold space and to be able to be that space for your partner. But of course, don't worry, I'll train you up on that, is what I said. But the fact is that he's not feeling comfortable about that. First of all, because he's never actually experienced a physiological birth. He's never witnessed that yet. He doesn't know anything about that. He's heard me talking about it a few times, but my brothers obviously are not sitting here watching these videos. They don't know anything about birth. And their girlfriends and wives, they're just not at that point yet where they're planning birth. So they still haven't witnessed it. But of course, dads I've talked to who have actually witnessed birth and even had beautiful home births at home and watched their wives give birth at home, they get it. In fact, my friend Donald Stojak even said, hey, like I've had kids at home. I know what it's like and I love what you're doing. And of course, I'm going to support you in this because I can see what that does for families. And I know what's on the other side. So when you've witnessed what birth is like in a hospital setting versus what it's like at home, it's a completely different game changer. And this is why a lot of times when family members are unsupportive, it's because they don't actually know what they don't know. They can't see it. And rather than waste your energy trying to educate them, the best thing you can do for yourself is just recognize they don't know anything and you need to just step back and go and reinforce your mindset and not let their fears control you. Number 13 is Pitocin. Now, I know I also talk about induction, but Pitocin is different in this sense, okay? I'm talking about you've already started your labor, you've already gone to the hospital, maybe your labor has slowed down, and now you're being given that dreaded failure to progress diagnosis from the maternity care system because they are all about efficiency. And your labor is not efficient. It is not following what they want in the textbooks. So what do they suggest? They suggest to slip a little bit of drugs into your system to get labor going and pick it back up. This can also happen if you're having an epidural, but of course that is not a natural birth. Now you've already introduced an intervention that is going to interfere with your birth. So again, when you are interfering with your physiological process with drugs or with any kind of interference on the outside, unsupportive people, or fear is getting in the way, that's when birth starts to slow down. Because what your body is signaling is saying, hey, it's not safe right now. We need to slow things down. We need to protect this baby and protect this mom, and it's just not safe. So your body will naturally shut things down or slow things down. And your care provider, of course, is looking at efficiency, and they're thinking we need to slip Pitocin. But Pitocin completely hijacks the physiological birth process. Now you're basically taking a brick, putting it on a gas pedal and expecting the car to get to the right destination. It's not going to work. It's going to be harder on your body. It's going to be harder on your baby. You're going to end up needing more pain medication than if you were following the physiological process. You may not get a break. Sometimes these contractions are one on top of the other. So instead of having the nice spaced out contractions, maybe even taking a break, maybe having like a 16-hour rest period and then going back into labor, now you've just put the brick on the gas pedal and things are just going. So if at any point your labor starts to slow down and you think, maybe I need to get some rest, you can go home, sign yourself out and go home. Or tell them that you don't want to go to the hospital yet and you're just going to stay where you are at. Even if you're planning a home birth, sometimes if you slow down, your midwife may be thinking that you need to speed things up, because remember, she's in the system and they have their own protocols that if she doesn't follow that, she could get in trouble. And this is what happened with my birth with my daughter, is labor slowed down for me. If I had been in the hospital, they would have been pushing Pitocin. Because I wasn't in the hospital, my midwife said that we may need to transfer because labor was not progressing. Instead of that, I sent the midwife home, and then I got my rest, and then things picked up again, and then labor was fine. Another thing is if your contractions are irregular, if they don't follow a pattern, as a doula, I've actually witnessed my clients and they don't always follow a pattern. Sometimes their contractions are very spaced out. This is especially true, I've noticed, with VBAC. Some VBAC moms, they end up having spaced out contractions. Others, they have a labor that's kind of slow to start, and then it slowly progresses, and then it gets intense, and then the baby's out. Your body knows what it's doing, and it's going to work the way that it needs to allow you that time, that rest, whatever it needs. It's going to happen that way. And it's not always going to go the way that the textbook expects it to be, because the textbook is a very narrow definition that was made by a man who had absolutely no concept of what a physiological birth actually was, and basically thought that we were defective machines that needed to be controlled and handled and manipulated and fixed and all this nonsense because we weren't efficient at birthing. The truth is that the system itself was just really freaking impatient and didn't understand what they were actually messing with. So Pitocin, bad. Big, big natural birth trap, okay? When your labor is slowing down, you do not want to just introduce Pitocin. There's no reason to do that. You are just being signaled to take a break and let your baby take a break. And that's all you need to do. Now, Pitocin does have its uses. And again, that's why you want to be very informed about the risks and benefits and draw those hard lines in the sand from the very beginning. My favorite book, The Thinking Woman's Guide to a Better Birth, has a lot of information on Pitocin, as does my newest favorite book, Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, where she talks about physiological birth. So you'll really understand how physiological birth works. And once you understand the hormones and how things actually work together and your own body's reaction to certain hormones, then you'll be able to make informed decisions about whether something is actually right for you. My friend Jenny, of course, she could not do Pitocin. And of course, her doctor very much kept saying, well, what if we need to do Pitocin? And she's like, no, I am putting in my chart, I am allergic to it. And they said, well, we don't really like that you put that in your chart, because now we can't give you the thing that we think is going to help you. And she's like, I don't care. I'm not having it. Unless there's a life or death emergency, that Pitocin is not going into my vein. You can take that Pitocin and shove it in your own vein. Like, I don't know if she said that exactly to her doctor, but she does have a t-shirt. You can go to thebirthhousenetwork.com where she has her store set up. Okay, natural birth trap, number 14. I technically alluded to this when I talked about Pitocin. Induction. This means any kind of induction. This doesn't just mean the typical medical induction. I am talking about membrane sweeps. I am talking about trying to get things going with the natural induction methods. There is no such thing as a natural induction, because the whole idea of induction is to force your baby out before your baby and your body is actually ready. If an induction method works, it is because your baby was already going to signal for labor to start within the next few days. If an induction works, it is because your body was already going to go into labor. There's the other side of the coin though. You decide to try to induce your labor just because you're trying to beat a clock or meet some arbitrary timeline that some man created over hundreds of years ago, thinking that this is the way that all women had to birth their babies by a certain point. You do that and follow some man who also had the Friedman's curve and thinking how long labor was supposed to last, you're going to have a bad time. because again, induction is messing with the physiological birth process. It is messing with your hormones. It is messing with your ability to stay relaxed. It's going to hurt. It's going to be more painful. It's going to cause stress on your baby. It may or may not end up that you need an assisted vaginal delivery, which means that they're pulling the baby out with forceps, or they're using the ventus, which is also the vacuum extractor to pull the baby out. I'm just going to say it. Don't go Googling what that actually looks like. It's freaky. It will scare the hell out of you. I've seen videos on YouTube of this. It's not fun. You don't want to see that. And the last one, if you're a first-time mom and you're planning to have an induction and your body's not favorable, you have a 3 times more likely a chance of having a C-section. And that's like half the time when I see these statistics, it's like when you get induced, it's a flip of a coin, whether it's going to work for you or not. And if it doesn't work, often the protocol, if an induction doesn't work, is they go straight to a C-section. Sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes if you start an induction and you're still early in the process and things aren't going to move ahead, you can decide you've changed your mind and go home. But oftentimes this isn't the case, because they are pushing induction because they want you to be efficient and follow their timeline. And I'm sorry, but induction is not your friend. It's just not. Unless you have a medical complication and you have figured out and read why induction matters, or done some other research to understand your actual complication and the likelihood of induction working and the likelihood of a complication with induction versus a complication without induction, and you've really figured out those numbers, you're not fully informed and you could be making a huge mistake that you'll wish that you hadn't made. Okay? So induction is a huge, huge natural birth trap. And I see it so often. And oftentimes it's for something as simple as you've gone past your due date, or your care provider is pushing induction because you're a certain age and they think that that's going to reduce the chance of stillbirth. It's not actually that big of a number, but they like to make it sound like it is. And then you just end up having a traumatic birth. It's terrible. Natural birth trap, number 15, the last one on the list today. Staying in bed. Okay? So culturally, and also within our maternity care system, when you enter the hospital, or when a character on TV enters the hospital to give birth, where do you normally see them? In bed, right? They're usually sitting in bed. They've got they've got the monitor strapped to them, and they're pushing and screaming, and it's awful, right? The thing is that our culture also informs what's happening in society. And sometimes what they do is they take this mainstream culture, and then you grow up seeing that, and you automatically assume that you need to birth on the bed and you need to stay in bed. And then what do? You go into the hospital and you see that this bed is right in the middle of the room. So naturally, your instincts are to go to the bed because that's where they're directing you. Now, the hospital, they might say that you can birth anywhere, that you can birth in any position, but I'm going to tell you, they actually want you to just birth on the bed. They actually want you to be on the bed and in the bed and laboring in the bed, because it's more convenient for them to have you strapped to the monitor so that they don't have to do much. They can just come in and look at the monitor and then walk out again. They can just come in, they can do the vaginal exams, and then they can walk out again. They can come in, put in the Pitocin and the IV drip, and then walk out again. It's convenient. Remember, the medical system is designed for efficiency. It's a business. It has always been a business. It was designed to be a business and designed to be efficient, because who created that medical system? It was men. And it was before we had the ability to vote. It was before we had the right to even be seen as people. And that is built right into our culture, and it is built into our system. It's something that we need to find, root out, and we have to change the whole system. How do we do that? By reclaiming birth and recognizing it as a physiological process. You are designed to move during birth. Your baby will signal to you multiple times when to get into certain positions. Now, this happened to me, is that I knew that I needed to be instinctively on my hands and knees, leaning over the bed. And the midwife and the nurse wanted me on the bed. So I was then put flat on my back, on the bed, told to push, and my baby wasn't ready. So it took 3 hours of me thinking that I was going to end up with a C-section because I couldn't get my baby out. Why? Because gravity was working against me. Jenny noticed that she couldn't be in any of the positions that she had initially intended to be in. She had wanted to catch her own baby, and technically she did, but she needed a little bit of help because while she had been laboring on the toilet for most of her labor, thinking that she had wanted to be lying on her side or hands and knees, but baby just wanted her up. So nothing else was working. She needed to be upright. So she had to be upright on the toilet. And then when it came to the actual birth, she was standing. She was standing as her baby was coming out. So your body is instinctively going to tell you which position to get into. Now, in a rare circumstance, you might feel more comfortable on your back, might. But oftentimes you're going to be on hands and knees, you're going to be on your side, you're going to be leaning over things, you're going to be squatting down, you're going to be upright, you're going to be leaning over the toilet backwards. You're going to find something that works for you. And that's going to be a more comfortable position. You'll be able to see how your body is working to move that baby down. Whatever that position is for you, you will instinctively know. You don't need anybody to tell you. But if you are staying in bed, you are now restricted in movements. Not only that, but it also sends that signal to your mind that something's wrong and that you're sick. It signals to the doctors that you are sick, and it allows them to also strap you to the monitor and do all the vaginal exams. As long as you stay out of that bed, they can't really do anything to you. They can't reach you. So the bed equals like basically submission. You don't want that. Okay, so those are the natural birth traps I have for you today. So again, let's go over them one more time. Natural birth trap number 11 is care providers that don't sit on their hands. Natural birth trap number 12 is unsupportive family members. Natural birth trap number 13 is Pitocin. Natural birth trap number 14 is an induction. And natural birth trap number 15 is, you got it, staying in bed. Okay, you don't want to stay in bed. All right, I will be back next week to tell you about the natural birth traps 16 through 20. And again, if you want the full guide and have this list that you can use as reference, it's a PDF guide. You can put it on your phone. You can refer to it anytime you want. Just go to www.empoweringmomsbirth.com/store. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.